Greetings and welcome to this episode of Everyday Enchantment. I'm your host, Stacey Andon, and today I have one of the most amazing beings on the planet to come and talk about death and rebirth and being the healer, spiritual worker, whatever we want to call it on this planet, how we navigate the super bumps of the ups and downs and sideways and all of those things. My guest today is Essence Turner. She is the CEO of Beautiful Happy Goddess, and she has the most incredible expertise. She's a radical forgiveness coach. She's also certified in Kundalini Yoga. She's a certified shamanic, I want to make sure I get this right, healer and hypnotist. I mean, she has the most beautiful blend of knowledge and expertise and just this essence that comes, again, her name Essence, that just comes through. I cannot wait for you to meet her and chat with us today. Greetings. Welcome. I've been excited all day. Like, I was having a hard time waiting because I was so excited to chat with you today.
Yay. I'm so happy to be here. You're one of my favorite people that I've met on my online journey. So I'm happy to be here with you.
Thank you. And I want to say that I've experienced your gifts personally, and they are some of a session with you that I had years ago changed my life. And so I just feel like, again, this topic of death and rebirth I know a lot of people are talking about it, but I think for both of us who have had transparency about some of the messier parts of our journey out on social media or out, we've been kind of comfortable talking about things that, again, I always say that everybody loves the before, right? Oh, things were like brewing or whatever was happening. And then there was the messy middle that nobody talks about. And then afterwards, I was reborn into this beautiful whatever it was. And it was like, whoa, wait a second. We somehow skipped all the really scary, uncertain parts where, again, that's how do we walk through that? How do we get through a place where, again, everything feels upside down, uncertain? I've been going through it myself this year, so it's like right on the tip for me to talk about. But I'm curious your thoughts, of course, as well as we open this up.
Yeah, so I feel like I've had a few deaths and rebirths on the journey. Of course, there was the big one that I went through in 2012, which is before, since I was a teenager, was just like a wild child, drinking, like borderline alcoholic, blackout drinking, in and out of toxic relationships. And this went all the way until maybe 28. Things started to slow down and just not feel like, this, I don't think this is a life I'm supposed to be living. Like,
Ooh, I love that question too. That, right? Like, I've had that too. So if you're in a moment and you're like, I'm not sure this is there's a breadcrumb right there that you might be having a little bit of a death or dark night of the soul.
Yeah. And so it still took a couple of years to really be brave enough and not even just brave, but like, I think sometimes you really need that big push, like that big yes, like, yes, I know that there's something else out there for me, and I'm actually going to start taking the steps to find it, to figure it out. And when that big yes hit, there was like no turning back. And for me, that looked like opening up to spirituality. It was never my thing. I knew about it, but I always thought like that's just like weird and different. But I knew in my soul there was something there for me, like in the self-help aisle. And then it just started.
And that was back years ago. That was quite the aisle.
And then I just kind of started going deeper into like law of attraction, intuition, and just like playing with all the light, fun things. And then it kind of got to the place where it was time to go deep, when I started looking at some limiting beliefs and seeing how, um, like being honest, that I didn't love myself, that I didn't value myself. That's how I ended up in the relationships that I was in, just on that dark path that I was on. And I call it dark because it felt dark, but I didn't know any other way, than to just be in a club, drinking and partying.
Mhm.
And so I could tell like a lot of that came from this feeling of unworthiness, and I would drink to feel better and feel confident. That was because I was shy, but that wasn't okay. So I needed a drink to be outgoing, and then one led into many drinks. And so when I got honest about the low self worth and lack of self love, it all led back to daddy issues, and I had to be willing to work on my relationship with my father, hence the radical forgiveness work. And I had to really learn how to love and value myself. And like, just the hardest part, I would say, is probably the self forgiveness that had to happen, of the decisions and the choices that I had made, when I was on the previous path. And it's like when you're stepping into the light and you look back on the behaviors, that
Mhm.
were there in the darkness. There's so much shame that comes up, and that was one of the hardest parts to navigate. But I was just willing to face it all. And then that's when I was able to start letting that old part of me just like die away, like really fall away. It's like a shedding to me, the shedding of the old identity, and allow this spiritual essence, this healed
Mhm.
essence, to be born. And that is like my first taste, and it probably will be the biggest death and rebirth
Yeah.
process that I will go through on my journey. But there's certainly been other smaller ones where there's parts of me I had to shut away and step into a new version of myself. So,
First of all, there's like three things that I'm already like wanting to pull out and talk about. The first one is this idea that you got the inkling, right? Like, is this life really for, like, you started to get it. And then you didn't, like, I love how you said you didn't act exactly right. It wasn't like, hey, I had this inkling. And then all of a sudden I just turned my life into something different. And I think that's exactly what happened to me. I mean, probably my biggest, to your point, my biggest death was going through my divorce, upending my, like, I had health issues, I had money, you name all the issues that I had family trauma that I hadn't even really touched yet. All of that kind of came in this huge flood. But to your point, I got a message like, spirit, love, whatever you want to say, one night that was like, you are not meant to be hanging out here. Like, this is not what we've got planned for you. And then it took years. I love this. I just want to hit on this because I think when we start talking about this, or when people are going through it, they think, oh, there's some timeline, right? That they're supposed to get through in this quick fashion. And it's like, it takes as long as it takes.
right.
And sometimes we know it's coming before we actually, like you said, we go into a little bit deeper. And I also really love what you said too. You meet yourself where you are. So you didn't start with all that deep radical forgiveness first, right? You did the things. And I love that. It's like, where can you already start to embrace this that doesn't feel so paralyzing, that it's just going to shut, like, you're going to get stuck in the middle of the death and be like, all right, I changed my mind. Which I say all the time. I'm like, I don't like this. I don't want to do this. And it's like, it's okay. Take a breath. I want to also pull out this idea of this radical forgiveness, because you're right. So often when we are shedding, I love this image, the shedding of our old selves, there's a lot of judgment there. There's a lot of judgment about what we did or didn't do, or how it should have been. Can you share a little bit more about this, like the process of radical forgiveness? or your process?
Yeah, so with radical forgiveness, it is a spiritual technology created by Colin Tipping, and you can get the book. It's
Okay.
called Radical Forgiveness by Colin Tipping. But one of the first two steps, they're kind of married, is feeling the feelings and telling the story. And the feeling, as you know, is one of the things that most people want to avoid.
Yeah.
Um, a
Yeah.
lot of people don't really mind uh, telling the story, but they don't want to feel the feelings, which will then have you telling a story that's not always the absolute truth.
Interesting.
So you might say things like, well, I know my dad wasn't in my life, but I mean, his dad wasn't in his life either. So I understand why, and so you start justifying, and you start,
Mhm.
taking the back door and like going into everybody else's story to avoid
Right.
feeling your feelings. And that is one of the, I always say that is one of the main reasons was why people don't heal, is because they're unwilling to tell the real dirty truth about how they feel about what happened to them. And I'm like, doesn't make your mom bad or a bad
Mhm.
mom. It's just you being honest about how the 10-year-old felt when mom did that thing. Right. And
Wow.
this is the part that we try to avoid. And then in self-forgiveness, though, that that's what we'll
Mm.
tell the truth, and we're really hard, and we don't give ourselves
Nope.
any
I
leeway.
always say forgiveness is like my favorite F word. It really is intense.
You like,
You're
I
right.
did this and I was so horrible and I should
Yes.
have known better, you know.
Yes.
Um, and it's actually the thing we give to everybody else is what we need to give to ourselves, is that same understanding and compassion with
So true.
ourselves. Understanding that I I I drank and I went down that dark path is because I didn't really know any other way. Like I was hanging with people that, did that. I didn't know that it was okay to just sit at the party and be shy in the corner, like I'm totally
Yeah.
fine with that now. If somebody want to come over and talk, they can. But then that wasn't okay. I felt like to fit in, I needed to drink, and then people would say, "Oh, you're so much more fun when you drink." Right?
Mm.
So that just created this pattern of like, in order to be out and social, like I need to drink.
Yeah.
And so it's just like looking back and seeing that essence, she didn't feel like she had any other choice.
Mhm.
If she wanted to fit in, this was her way. And this is and also there's no going back to change it. Right. So
Mhm.
being so hard on myself now today, being so hard on past essence is not going to change anything. The true
Really good point.
change is going to come from loving and understanding and having compassion for what
Mhm.
she went through. That's where true change is. But it's weird because we think the change is going to come from being mean and
Yes.
hard on ourselves, but that is actually what keeps you stuck.
That is the best thing I've heard in so long. It's so true. And especially when you're in a period of like death and disorientation and you haven't really quite kind of grown into wherever whatever that newer self is. And so you don't really feel like you fit anymore as you've been shedding, but you're right. Like I think that that's a really really excellent point about that's where we can get stuck, where all of that judgment. I know for me, people used to ask me all the time, do you regret your divorce? Do you regret getting married to him? Do you regret? And I was like, I don't. Would I do it again now, knowing what I know? No, I'm not saying that. And what I am saying is that, again, with based to your point, the person who I was in that moment, whatever however I was operating, I was coming out of a very abusive childhood. I wanted somebody who was just going to wrap me. I mean, he wrapped me all right. And it was like, but I get it. I get why I did that. And, I also think, to your point, what I'm hearing as well, it's like when we go through these, whether it's the big one or smaller ones, there's some social conditioning, right? There's some conditioning that we thought, this is how I'm supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
And, it can be, like you said, everybody's story is a little bit different, but it's like, this is how I'm supposed to be, which for me was like, take care of everybody else at your own expense. And each time I go through kind of a morphosis, whatever, it becomes this like, ooh, I need to break apart or break off or be in relationship differently with whatever these beliefs, these conditions that I felt like I needed in order to be accepted, to be loved, to be okay, to be successful. I mean, it applies to business as well too, right? Because we've all been taught, here's the spiritual way to have a business or whatever. This is the way. And it's like, I've done so much of deconstruction of myself and my life and my business this year. It's like, I realize the more and more I sit in these uncomfortable places, like you said, and tell the stories with honesty, it's like, oh, I so get why I did that. And there isn't, to your point, because I think we've practiced this enough, it's like there isn't as much judgment usually these go around. Now there's a lot of confusion. I won't ever
Amen.
get over that. But I will say that, like, again, because people, I think, sometimes are like, oh, how could you really do this? And it's like, it's a practice, right? It's a
Mhm.
practice of coming back to it over and over again and going, of course I did those things. It makes so much sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And just in this conversation, I can look at my business and see the smaller deaths and rebirths are actually still following that same tread of thinking I need to be someone else
Mm.
in order to be accepted. And
Mhm.
so for a while there was thinking you probably heard me talk about this in the mastermind we were both in, but like always, should I be a healer or should I be a coach? Like this
Mm.
confusion there,
Mhm.
because like in my head, it's like coaches are more acceptable,
Mhm.
and you sit up straight and let me close up my cleavage, right?
Yes, I
And
hear you.
a healer and embodying their feminine energy, like that's just too woo woo. I'm not really ready to be her, so I think I'm just going to put on the button up shirt and be this coach, but then I'm just in this energy of what I that doesn't feel good because it doesn't feel like me.
Yeah.
And so, but you go along, and especially being in certain environments where I'm with and around a lot of other coaches and not around a lot of other woo-woo type people, I'm
Mhm.
still putting on the mask. And then when I finally like take myself out of those spaces and I'm get back to like who is essence, and then I'm like, well, I'm not being her. And then like who I've, let's say, built up over the last 2 years now, she has to shed because she also is not me, right? She's
Mhm.
who I thought I needed to be accepted in the online world. And then
Mhm.
it just gets to the point where if I have to be something or someone else, then like I don't want any part of it.
Yeah.
And then so I just had to like step away and just really get back into myself and just like grieve her and all the business ideas and even the investments that I put into
Mhm.
her, and I just have to like be okay and forgive and just let it all die away and continue to let this version of myself be born, and also learn to love and accept her, because actually from my old world this is weird, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like, but I have to learn to be okay with being weird, and like, and there's nothing, being weird is awesome, you know? So
Absolutely. I'm in for the weirder the better. And I think, well, a couple of things that I really love that you said. First of all, it takes some time, and for a lot of us, I mean, I've stepped a lot, even more so recently, off social media too, because you can't. I don't know. I shouldn't make a blanket statement like this, but I have found that it's really difficult to do this inner work and to shed and grieve and do all the things that we're talking about, and also have all this energy output, right? Out in the world. It's like there's too much, it's in an imbalance for me. And I had to confront this belief that, like, it's okay to go off and be quiet and not write a newsletter for a month and not post in my private group and be okay. Like all of these things that, again, like you said, are saying, well, are you sure you should do that? Because maybe you shouldn't do that and you're gonna whatever, whatever. And it then gets coupled with, but this is what I really feel in my heart I want to do. Right. So we kind of grapple with this process. And I think, again, we don't give ourselves enough permission to really take that step back to do whatever it is we need most before we start kind of engaging again more regularly with the world. I don't know. Maybe that's just
no,
me and you.
I agree, and especially for the us in the helping service industry, where it's just kind of natural to want to help and give. And
Mhm.
so we think that we should always be helping and giving others and not taking our sacred time to help ourselves in those times when we really need it. Like our soul is really needing our own attention.
Yeah.
But we just been so bombarded with being consistent and being online and posting 4 or 5 times a day, that
Mhm.
it feels so unproductive to go offline and take care of yourself, when what I'm learning is actually one of the most productive things that you can do. Just like how you were saying, like how you can feel my energy in a
Mhm.
different, it like it feels different. And that's because I had to take the time off screen to just be with me, because it's what I noticed is, when I'm going in doing the work and then I get online, my brain is like, oh, we need to be doing her program. We need to be, you know.
Yes. Yes. Oh, it's like an endless trap that your brain just gets sucked right into. I'm with you. I'm so with you.
Yeah, yeah. And I think even it's especially harder when you started going in, doing your own, you're opening up. And so there's
Mhm.
this opening, and then the ego mind wants to fill it with all this stuff, when it's like, no, this is exactly what we need to be feeling ourselves with, is just our own essence, our own energy, our own love and attention. That is it. And I would still fall prey to my ego mind. So that's when I just decided, like, when I'm doing this type of work, this shedding, I can't be online that much. And so that means I'm not posting, I'm not writing. Like, it just has to be about me. And I just can't feel bad about that, because I know at the end of the day, it's gonna serve so many more people.
I love that. And it's interesting. I don't know if I've said this publicly, but I'm going to say it to you right now. Beginning of this year, end of last year, well, I lost my gallbladder at the end, like a year, almost a year ago. And it just like catapulted this whole very interesting year for me. And one of the things that I heard early on as the year was changing into this year was your business is going to completely melt down and it's going to look nothing like what you have created. You are going to absolutely need to step into the nothingness
Mhm.
and trust that it is going to come, whatever it is, whatever this new chapter, whatever you want to call it. And I'm going to tell you, and I know because again, I'm going to be really honest, scaring the living daylights out of me to be like, I built this, it's 8 years old. It's like, it's this thing. And I'm going to just let it just completely implode or whatever I'm going to do. And it's like, yes, you are. And it's funny because it can get very stuck in this, like, again, well, how could I ever right? That to your point, the ego, the mind, it's like, how can this possibly work out for me? Right. And I can't explain it. Not that I'm supposed to, but it's like even trying to just be like, you just have to be in it. And I think that these deaths, whether they're, everybody knows we're in it or not in it, it's like you really have to allow yourself the space to move through it and to move through whatever doubts and whatever other stuff comes through. Because if you don't, to your point, I mean, I've done it many times. Hopefully, I'm doing it a little bit better where I'm not just staying stuck in something
Right.
because I'm like pushing against what I think it should be rather than it's like, no, there's something amazing coming. And every time it's like, there's a miracle coming through. There's a miracle coming through. Stop standing here blocking it. And then the part of me that's like, no.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you just explained that journey.
Yeah.
Because it does take us a huge amount of surrender and trust. And I think
Mhm.
for so many of us, that's not really natural. Like we want to be in control, we want to know the how.
Yeah.
And the how just can never come through when we're stressed, when we're obsessed with the how. Like it creates
Mhm.
this is what it feels like to me, this like
Totally. I call
crazy.
it frenetic. It's like, yes,
Yes.
I know what you speak of.
Yeah, like you can't hear the angels, you can't hear your higher self when you're like this.
No, you can't.
So the more you can get yourself just being calm, just whatever that is, yoga, kundalini yoga, walking, these are the things that do it for me. But my ego is always like, okay, been doing it for 3 days, still no answer,
Right?
like maybe we should
When are
figure
we gonna
it out ourselves.
exactly. You're so right about that. And that's a really, really good point. Or like, okay, I can do this for a week or 3 days, whatever. But it's like, now we need to do something productive. Like that, your brain is always like, I feel
Mhm.
like at least mine is always in the shadows, like ready to like try to prod you to do something productive, whatever it thinks is you should be doing. It's like right there in your ear.
Yeah, and then that's those moments where, I mean, and only it's just gonna come from practice though, of maybe moving too fast and seeing end up stuck, or whatever you're doing doesn't feel right.
Mhm.
For you to learn to understand that, okay, I took action from ego, not soul. Like I didn't sit in the silence, the groundedness long enough for that download, that inner whisper to come through. I just took action from the ego, and now I'm here again. And so I've done that so many times that now it's like I'm really catching on to, I can see where, nope, I'm just taking action because I feel this pressure to move, but it's not coming from here, it's coming from here.
That's such a good point, and that's such a good, again, realization for all of us that I mean, whether you're in the healing works or in service or not, I mean, we're all going through so many, just transitions in our lives. It's like, absolutely, where's the energy coming from? Like, and to your point, I'm sure I know if I ask myself that question, I know the truth. I might be acting on something, but as soon as I stop or somebody stops and it's like, take a breath, Stace, and really think about it, it's like, oh, hot damn, you're right.
Yeah, you're right. It does. It takes, you got to ask that question first. And back, something you said earlier is like it takes as long as it takes. So that process of death, rebirth, or shedding, whatever you're sitting in, it's gonna take as long as it takes.
Yeah.
And if you move too fast, you just may end up in a place where you don't want to be. You're creating something you're not really that enthused about, and then you're back to square one again. So
Yeah.
you might as well just sit and trust and surrender and just let it come through your heart and your soul.
Yeah. And I think to your point earlier too, the hardest stuff for me is like feeling the feeling. I mean, because if you're willing to really go into the feelings, like I don't like melting my business down. This feels uncomfortable. This feels like how I'm gonna take care of myself. Right? Like every deep, deep fear. How are people are probably gonna like, not like me anymore because they're gonna like, what is she doing? All of those things that are the scariest feels like can you sit with those? And I know you and I both have done this work, but it's not for the faint of heart.
And no, mm-mm.
And
It's
yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
oh, I was just agreeing. Like, no, it's not for the faint of heart. No.
It isn't. And I think that again, you're willing, any of our willingness to be in the feelings, to be in the this it takes as long as it takes, to be in the silence and kind of pull back in is kind of in direct, you just said it, kind of maybe I'm summarizing, but like in direct proportion to how much we can actually go through death and rebirth and really touch who we are.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And for me, it can only, and that could be a blanket statement, but to me, it can only be done in the quiet. And that doesn't mean you can't be, in a group, having a meditation or even a yoga class, but it's going to come from a place where your mind is still. Like the more you can do that and put yourself in those spaces and find ways that feel good to you to like be in that stillness, um the quicker your answers are going to be, are going to come through. But these are the things we want to avoid. We want to go on walks with a podcast in our ear instead of just listening to the sounds of Mother Earth, right? Like,
It's true. Although I will say that everybody goes, Stacey, what podcast do you listen to? I go, I listen to nothing when I'm out in the woods.
me too. Yeah.
It's for that exact reason. It's very meditative, even though it's walking and I'm not just sitting. It's a very spiritual process for me. And it doesn't mean like I go out there like, oh, I've got to be spiritual. It's just like, just go out there and commune with myself. And I always say Mother Nature's like the best life coach, healer, whatever you want to say on the planet.
100%. And I'll have
Yeah.
to be honest with that. I'm kind of in a space where I will say in the last couple months where like just sitting, being still, like just meditating doesn't feel that great to me. And my mind is going a mile a minute, but I didn't just give up. It's kind of like, well, what would be fun? And I was like, oh, some crystal bowls. And so I bought the crystal bowls for that to be like my morning sound meditation and me just playing. So it's like there's still a doing, giving my brain something to do and
Right.
focus
Got to
on.
chew on something like
Yeah,
a puppy. Yeah.
exactly. But it's still bringing that stillness, the creativity, the intuition, where it's like, ding it now and now go on a certain, it's just, it's a different meditative process, but it's still meditative. So just finding what feels good to you to put yourself in that grounded, quiet place. And the more you do it, to me, the faster the answers come through. It's just we put that stuff off, and that's why it seems like it takes forever.
It's so true. And I think also I've found recently through this last death and rebirth that whatever I used in other, like to help me through other situations and other experiences, it's like, to your point, it's like different things. Like I always took a shower at the end of the night. It was my way I cleared my energy. When I step in the shower at night, my body wants nothing right now to do with a shower at night. So it's like, okay, I've also had to kind of abandon everything I leaned on to help me navigate through situations in the past. It's like, nope, we're not going to do that. So I love what you said, right? So if you've been a meditator, and I mean anybody is listening, if you've done something for a really long time and it doesn't feel good, right, whatever word we want to use anymore, it's okay. It doesn't mean you're never going to meditate again, but whatever this situation is, it's like, are you willing to be in this present moment and allow yourself? And I love the like, what would be fun? What would feel, I always say, what would feel delicious? It's like,
Mhm.
or enchanting, and being open to it being very different than what we've done before.
Yeah, I think
Oh,
that's a great point. Thank you for really bringing that out,
mhm.
because I do think we think that what worked before should work, and that's just not always going to be the case. So I'm glad you
Yeah.
really, yeah.
Well, you've shown me that over the years that we've been friends and connected. I see you modeling it and doing it all the time. So it's easy for me when I look at what you're doing to be like, ah, yes, remember that. Stace is such a beautiful, You're such a beautiful messenger for so many of us doing this work in the world. And as much as I would love, because I could sit and talk to you about this for hours, we will, I promise, we will be wrapping up. So if people want to get into the essence world, they want to connect with you, they want to see what you're doing, what kind of offerings you have, how can they easily find you?
Right now, I'm in the process of finishing a book that is for light workers. That's about healing your mind and just yeah, healing our mind so we can like not allow the ego to distract us, and we can do our work and share our light with the world. So to keep up with me and when the book is coming out, let me see, Instagram probably best. It's at Essence Turner _ and the website is essenceturner.com.
Sweetness. And we'll put all the links there so people can find it easily. And again, I highly recommend everybody listening to step into Essence's world because there's profound healing. And I think, at least for me, I don't know if I used to believe that you could be in somebody's presence for a short amount of time and have an experience that could change your life. I think my brain thought, oh, you need to be in a program and you need to be doing this work for forever. And you are one of the people that taught me that a moment can shift your life
Mhm.
so profoundly. And again, it's being open to all this stuff. I feel like I'm gonna go for a walk after this and just let all of everything that you said just soak in. So thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing your wisdom with us. We're so appreciative.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. And that's a wrap. Thank you so much for tuning in. Get all the delicious details and links we've mentioned in this episode in the show notes below. If you'd like to chat about this episode or learn more about how to work with me, come visit me in my private Facebook group, Everyday Enchantment, or check out my website, staceyandon.com, where you can find out more about my Leap of Faith coaching, my Map Makers group program, and the School of Intuitive Magic. Plus a special shout out for all the production and editing of this show by Richard Wilmore. That's it for now, love. Here's to living a life enchanted. See you soon.